timer control. A timer is a control that generates an event after a set interval. It also has the option to generate recurring events. It's like an automatic button. The commonly used properties is the name. It's a unique ID to refer to a specific control in code. The enable property. The default is false. The control is not updated. Nothing fires until you enable it. The interval. It's a frequency of events in milliseconds. 1000 milliseconds equals 1 second. You set this amount to generate how often the control will fire. The default event is the tick event. It causes the code to be executed when fired. So every time it fires, the code inside this event will execute. Let's take a look and see how all this works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a label on this form. I'll go to my common controls and add a label. And I'm going to set the properties on this label. First of all, I'll call it label out. I want to make auto size false. I'm going to make the border style single. Then I'm going to change its size. Stretch it out to something like this. Center it on the form. Horizontally and vertically. And I want to change the font, just so we can see it. Bold, and make it a size 20. I'm going to go ahead and take that label right here. I'm going to get rid of it, but I'm also, before I do that, I'm actually going to set this up as middle center, and then erase the label itself. And now I've got a label sitting up here with nothing in it, which means I can start to do something with something called a timer. The timer control is found in the components section. You can notice it down here, and if I double click on it, it sits here at the bottom in this section right down here. And it has some properties. Number one, I'm going to change the name of this thing to be timer do it. TMR for my Hungarian notation, and then do it. In other words, it'll fire. I'm also going to change the interval to 1 second, 1000 milliseconds. And that's really all I have to do here. Oh, I do want to set the enable to false, so it actually fires right away when I run the program. So I'll turn this on, so it's actually enabled. Now I need to write some code for this thing. Now what I want to do is I want to go into let's go ahead and into code on this thing. Let's go ahead and fire the do it, so you can see that it generates a timer do it.tick event. And I can write code in here to actually make something happen. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to set up a small array up on top here. I'm going to set up a string array, and it's going to be a single-dimensional array. We'll call it str countdown. And I'll make it equal to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off. And put a little semicolon after this thing, and we've got our array. Now I'm going to also set up a counter. Int, integer, int, counter. I can use X, but I'll use counter. Make it equal to a -1. So it's not looking at the first element. So when we add something to it, we'll be looking at 0, or the first element in the array, which will be a 10. That's all I really need to do. Now I'm going to my timer area here, this thing that fires right here, and we can put some code in here. So I'm going to set my int counter is equal to int counter +1. Then our little if statement here. If int counter is greater than 10, I want to do something. I want to close the form. Otherwise, we're going to say lbl out.text is equal to str countdown int counter. That's it. That's all I need to do. I'll do a file save on this, and we'll run it. The program will start out. There it is. And automatically fires. And then ends. And that's the extent of all you need to do for a timer event. So basically, it's firing this code down here every time it happens, every second that it fires. And this thing is doing nothing more than incrementing a counter, which is a global area counter, so it can be seen from both places here. And it's counting down to 10. And once it looks at each element inside of the array and prints it out on the label. Now let's take a look at another version that we can possibly do. We're going to start out creating a wheel like in Wheel of Fortune. I did this once years ago in Visual Basic, an advanced Visual Basic class. And we actually created the entire game. This is going to be just the wheel section of this thing. And I want to show you first of all what I did. I needed the wheel, for example. So what I did do was in my graphics area, I created a bunch of wheels on here. And I'll look at the first one real quick so you can see what it looks like. And it looks sort of like this. Now, what I did is I think I pulled this off the internet, found a copy of it, and then I simply moved it. I think there's 24 sections on it, so basically 24 into 360 goes, I don't know how many degrees. You kind of shift it over and you end up with another version of this thing, which would be wheel number 1. This particular wheel. Let's see, let's go ahead and put it in photos again, just once. And there it is again. It's slightly shifted. The 8 is over here. Here's wheel 2. Oh, actually, I give some bumps here. That's what I got, BMTs. So you can see a slight difference there. This one's got 700 up on top. So you're shifting it. You're taking pictures of it, moving in different directions. We're going to use the timer control and the image list control to simulate a spinning wheel. So let's go ahead and try this. What I need to do first is I want to create and put a picture box on my form. So the first thing I'll do is find a picture box as my common controls. It's right here. And I'll lay it in here. And I'll make it something like this, bring it down, and maybe make it 256 by 256, because that's the size of the picture. That's the maximum size you can use for the image list anyway. So I'm going to create 256 by 256. And we'll bring it in like that. So it looks something like that. And I'm going to leave it roughly here, because I'll probably want to add a button or something down and below this and everything else. So that's there. Now what I want to do is I also want to go into my properties on this thing. I want to name this. So I'm going to call this PBX wheel. And that looks pretty good. And I'm going to go down here and I want to get an image on here so I can actually put something there. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up the image. I'm looking at the image control and I need to find one. So I'll go to my local resources, find one here. And I happen to have one in this area up in the graphics area. And that's the folder you were just looking at a few minutes ago was this guy. And I believe I used the BMPs. We'll just grab this guy and put him up here. And there he's sitting up there right now, and I can say OK to this. Now, don't worry about the distortion in this thing. We can put it on here. Now we'll just change that distortion so that we're sizing it to zoom. So I'll go down here, and I'll hit my zoom property on my size mode, which is right here. Hit zoom, and now it fits right inside the picture box just nicely. So no problem there. It's 256 by 256. Do a file save, run this, and it looks like this. Looks just fine. Okay, so now let's give it let's make it do something. To make it do something, I'm going to need a couple things. I'm going to grab an image list. And in another video, I showed you that in the component section, we can bring in the image list and it will sit right down here. That image list now needs to have some properties set on it too. So I'm going to call this thing image wheel. We'll call it IML for image list, image wheel. And we're going to need a collection. So we're going to go to the collection here and we're going to pull it up, add our collection to it, and it's going to be all these guys. I just want the BMPs. Let's grab these BMPs. I'll highlight the first one here, hold my control key down, and grab all the BMPs. And there's my list. And you can see they're all populated on here. 0 through 24. We've got all of these guys here. Looks like the 24 wheels up here. Really? Yeah, I don't want this first one. Let's get rid of him. We want 1 through 24. Now we've got that. And 0 through 23 is are named in here. So we're going to save this. And that'll give us our collection of wheels that are all changed. I'm going to also change the image size now to 256 to 256. Now they're all set to go. I'll do a file save again just so I've got everything stuck here and we're in good shape. Now all I need to do is actually bring in a timer. And that's down in the control section as well. So I'll double click on the timer. Here we have our timer. We're going to set the properties on this guy to be timer wheel. TMR And we're going to leave everything else alone. We're going to leave the false 100 for the interval. That's fine, and we'll do all this in code. So we're just going to sit there. In other words, this guy's going to fire. Right now, it's not even turned on, so it'll do nothing. If we actually run this program, nothing will happen except we'll see that first wheel up there. And that's the extent of it right there. Okay, so nothing's happening. I also want to cause something to make it happen, so I'm going to put a button down in here. There's my button, and I'm going to make it the size of this wheel, at least the width of it. And I'm going to call this guy spin. This is how we'll turn on the wheel, the timer. It'll be button spin. We'll adjust the font on this guy a little bit, make it bold, and make it 12. That looks a little better now. And so now we have ourselves a button that's ready to go there. Let's go ahead and do two things. Let's create an event for the timer in code. And there's our timer tick event. Let's also go up and create a spin event. And there it is. So now we've got the two things sitting in here. What I want to do initially is in the global area, I'm going to set up a couple of things. I'm going to set up an int x, make that equal to 0. This is going to be our counter integer. We're also going to set up right in here an integer called int speed. We'll make that equal to 500. This will be our interval that we're going to set up. Speed control variable. Now I'm going to duck down to my spin area here, and I'm going to set my int speed to be equal to 50. So we're going to start out with 50 there in the spin. We're going to set our timer wheel dot interval equal to int speed. So 50 will go into the interval when we initially click the spin button. The spin button will then execute. It'll turn on, basically it'll turn on the timer, and we'll do that by setting timer wheel dot enabled is equal to true. And that turns on the wheel, so that will cause it to start moving and doing something. Right now it's got nothing to do. So this is where we're actually going to be coding what we need to actually make the timer work so that it can work with the image list. So I'm going to start setting up something right away, and I'm going to say that pbx wheel dot image is equal to iml image list wheel dot images x. What does that do? Well, x is 0. So the very first image is going to go into the picture box automatically as soon as the thing ticks the first time. And then I'm going to set up an if statement. If x is set equal to 23, we're going to do something. We do a bunch of stuff. Otherwise, we're going to do something else. And what are those things we're going to be doing? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to say that x is equal to x plus 1. And then we're going to say our pbx wheel dot image. Oh, why have I got wheel 1 here? I shouldn't have that. Dot image is equal to iml wheel dot images int x. Or wheel images x. And let's fix this. We don't want wheel 1 here. Why do we have wheel 1 here? Let's take a quick look and see if I actually named it wrong. Look at the picture box. Yeah, wheel 1. Let's change that. See if I can change that name. Now let's go back in here and fix this thing up. Now it's happy, I think. Yeah, wheel. And yeah, everything's fine now. So if wheel is set equal to 23, we're going to do something. Otherwise, if it's not 23, that means we've gone through the list of images in the array, and we can start going back to image I equals I plus 1, and then grab our next wheel. Basically, this is a counter. If it hits 23, we've gone through the entire image array, and so we need to do something there. So we're going to set that up now. And we're going to do that right here by setting up a random number generator. We're going to set up random.rand new random. Why am I doing this? Because if we did not put a random number generator, we would, no matter what the number of ticks are in the wheel, it's always going to land in the same spot. It's always going to come back to the same visual. So we want to change this so that it looks random and a different number pops up every time the wheel is spun. So that's what's going to happen here. So we're going to say x is equal to rand.next 24. So it's going to create a random number between 0 and 23. That allows us, remember, we're going through this list, simply incrementing x all the time here and displaying it. If we hit 23, we want to do something else. We'll start out with a new random number. Could be 1, could be 24, could be 22, could be 19, could be 15, whatever. And that's going to allow us to then work with it. So we're also going to say that int speed is equal to int speed plus 50. Why are we doing that? We're decreasing our speed. Wheels need to slow down. So by increasing that interval, it's going to slowly slow down. So it looks like it's actually simulating a real wheel. It goes fast and then starts to slow down and get down there. Our timer wheel dot interval is now going to be equal to that int speed. We change that timer so that it decreases. Now we're going to have another if statement in here. If int speed is greater than 300, TMR wheel dot enabled is equal to false. We're going to turn off the timer. And PBX wheel dot image is going to be equal to IML wheel dot images X. In other words, whatever X is, that's what we're going to display in our wheel. Do a file save on this. We'll do a run. Here comes our wheel. We'll do a spin on it. 800 was up on top. It's starting to slow down now, as you can see. And finally drops to 200. Be nice to put a little indicator up here. So we'll do that real quickly. We can do that with another little label. I'll grab a label up here, pop it up in here. We'll need to change that label so that it is auto size off. Bring it up to the top, bring it across to here. Looks like it's set fine. In the middle of it, I'll put something. I'll set the center to right in here, top center, and I'll put in a character in here, which it might be let's say bar. That should work. And let's make that bar bold right away so we can see it. We can even change the size on it. Maybe let's see what 20 looks like. Just see what that looks like. That looks pretty good. Yeah, it's got a little bar up there right now. Do a file save. Do a run. There's our wheel with its little bar on top of there. I could have made this white too, I suppose, in the background. Spin it again. Now we got a pointer actually pointing to that wheel where it happens to be. And it stops at 200. Is that because something's wrong, or will it change each time? Yeah, 150. So it's randomly picking up different numbers as we go along. So that's basically a timer. It doesn't have much code. Basically, you set up the initial speed on it. You've got something that turns it on down here. And then this section right in here is the timer itself. And you can do what you need to do in here. You can test this thing, try different things to make it work, make it speed, change the speed, play with the interval. You can play with when you're going to stop it, different things like that. And basically, you're creating animation. It can be used for anything, moving a car across the screen, moving anything. So the timers can be very, very useful. That's the timer in a nutshell.